Welcome to Becoming Ekklesia, a new show that reveals the journey of modern-day believers as they step out of traditional church roles and embark upon a faith-filled adventure into the abundant life of kingdom authority. The old way of doing church is over. We are coming into a new era of change that requires not only a mental shift, but a completely new way of being. We are Becoming Ekklesia.
So today on our program, we're here with Steve and Barb Eichhorn. Everybody calls him Ike. Everybody still calls her Barb, I imagine. So thank you guys for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. Absolutely. We got to see each other for the first time face-to-face in DC last week. It was really good to meet you guys face-to-face. It's good to have you in boot camp class. I can't remember how many months ago that was now. It was probably half a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was, I think, January of last year, so about a year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's
class number 43.
43, yeah. Good memory. So, well, to start with, would you tell us a little bit about your family background?
Sure. I came from a conservative family. We went to church on a regular basis. My parents were really, truly not practicing Christians. My dad was a Christian. My mom wasn't. I have two brothers and a sister. Kind of that father's knows best kind of family growing up. My journey in life, we have 8 grandchildren, and I have 4 kids. I have grandchildren that are around the country growing up.
My young childhood was a little bit different. It was definitely not a family knows best. Raised by a single mom. My parents divorced when I was really little. 5 kids in our family, so that was interesting. And so as far as my early childhood faith, my mother decided to take us around to every church in town and try them all out. So it was interesting, and I developed a faith. God called me pretty early, and I gave my life to Christ when I was 10 or 11 years old, water baptism. And I was actually the only one in the family that wanted to go to church every Sunday. So it was interesting. I call myself a crock pot Christian because it's, just that little bit added when I was little. And then every year some more is added. And I love that because we're still, Ike and I both are on a faith journey together and we enjoy it.
Even before we started recording, we talked about how we're like black sheep in our families, unfortunately. Yep. Why did that happen to you guys? Why did you become the black sheep in your family?
I was pretty wild when I was growing up. I did go to college. I had an opportunity to play hockey in college, but I wasn't forced to have to play on a scholarship because my parents had helped my brothers and sisters. I was the youngest, so I was spoiled. That's part of the black sheep. And the other part of the black sheep is, I think politically, that I have been involved. My mom was a staunch Republican conservative. And I remember her being in the League of Women Voters back in, back in the 60s. They'd have election parties and she just loved Tricky Dicky, Nixon. I was like maybe 9th grade or 10th grade when it came to Watergate hearings. And I watched all of it,
Wow,
and
that's
so,
really smart.
Yeah, and kind of my indoctrination to getting involved in civics and in politics. I am conservative. I remember when my first son was born and I called my mom up and he was born on Bill Clinton's election day and he won the election and I called her up and I said, well, you have a new grandson. I named her Bill for Bill Clinton. and she named him, yeah. And so I'm always playing games like that with them.
Yeah.
And even now with what's going on in the world, a lot of people would call me pretty radical. because I have some very strong feelings about what's going on spiritually and what's also going on politically. I pretty much go against the grain most of the time.
Yeah.
So,
Barb, how about you? Do you consider yourself a
Yeah.
black sheep?
I think it's the spiritual warfare that we've always been involved in. Since, I mean, the two of us have always had some spiritual warfare going on, and the conservatism
Yeah.
in my family anyway. I
Right.
have one sister that's conservative, but the rest of my family, a lot of my family is very liberal.
Yes, you make a good point. It's not us who consider ourselves the black sheep. It's
Yeah.
our family members, because we don't want to be that. And
No.
we kick against it, but unfortunately the father of lies whispers lies into the ears of other people.
Right.
You see that not only happening in family dynamics, but in, like we were talking about Washington, D.C., how we felt like we were outsiders. That's because that is enemy territory, and the enemy's whispering in the ears of people saying, watch out for these people. They're evil. They're racists. And we know that's not true. In fact, that crowd probably didn't litter. That crowd probably didn't, I'm talking about the MAGA people,
Right.
probably didn't cause any sort of chaos in and of themselves. Of course, there's fringe elements in every group.
Right.
But the infiltration is what gave that group a bad name. You know?
Right. No, they were very polite. I mean, we were in a really tight crowd at one time, and everybody, just even moving around, everybody was very polite.
I was
Yeah.
impressed with how much knowledge, people had around this. There was a lot of talk about a lot of different things, and it was deep. It was heartfelt, and it was all ages, all walks of life. That was exciting to be in that kind of crowd, to experience it.
Yeah.
So that made me feel like not being a black sheep.
Right.
Until I drove home.
Exactly.
Yeah, that fellowship with people of who have their eyes open and who are like-minded, that's a beautiful thing. And I hope
it was.
we experience more of that, because they're trying to shut that down. We know that.
Yeah, you could feel that. They did not welcome us at all.
Yeah.
And yet people were happy to be there. It was fun because people were happy to be there, and you could see them so happy to having their voices united. Maybe we weren't being listened to, but at least we were united. I mean, they flooded the field, so the field would be muddy. It was horrible. They took away all the porta potties. It was, that city did not want us there. That's
I
for
didn't
sure.
realize that you think they intentionally muddied the field?
Oh, they did. They flooded it.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible.
It
Oh
was,
yeah, we were in slop.
Yeah.
Cold.
Terrible. Yeah, it was pitifully cold. So you both have been in ministry for a long time, and we'll hopefully touch on what brought you to Omega Kingdom. And maybe as you touch on your ministry, maybe you'll touch more on your journey of faith. But what sort of ministry have you both been involved in up until now?
Well, for me, it's actually been a pretty big variety. But I would say number one has been small group ministry and youth ministry. Going back to Promise Keeper days, back in late 80s, and actually came back making promises. That was actually a pivotal time in my life, that in those 2-3 years there were some deaths in the family and just things going on in my life, and Promise Keepers. And since then, I've been on fire for the Lord. And I made a major commitment to small group and accountability group. And I remember actually being told by the church, no, we don't do that stuff. The old church that I used to be a part of, the men's fellowship group that I started back in the late 80s, is still going on a monthly basis with breakfast and Bible study and accountability groups. Wow. And I've been doing small group forever. I've been a facilitator. I was called I have a strong passion for evangelism. And the Lord has opened my eyes to Nikki Gumbel and Alpha. I was trained in by Derek Rust, who was one of the original vicars in Holy Trinity, Brompton, and with Nicky Gumbel in England. It was a dinner and a movie. A lot of people come into faith, a lot of people realizing that it isn't kind of like Ekklesia, in that a small group was the beginning of a different dynamic. There are a lot of people that are turned off to churches, and they won't, they're not turned off to God. They're not turned off to Jesus. They're turned off to churches. That's one of the things that Alpha and other programs I've been involved in. Association of Christian Teens, and now I'm involved. We moved over here to the Wisconsin side from Minnesota about 8 years ago. I've been praying on some property here. Barbie and I have for a number of years, a development with 1,000 acres, gorgeous, gorgeous property. We wanted to start a youth ministry there. Lo and behold, I mean, literally on my ATV, like the very week that this organization started up, I drove in and said, what's going on? And to make a long story short, it's called Hope Farm School, and it's inner city teenagers and kids from the inner city that have probably no father in their life, dysfunctional. Some are behind in school. They're not delinquents, and have a beautiful facility there. So it's a private Christian school. And I'm retired, so that's my passion right now, is doing that in Ekklesia. We're always, always open to how the Spirit is moving. I will just give a plug to Jan, because one of the things that Ekklesia in my faith journey, what a timing, because with Mark Taylor and the 501c3, and just, we have a lot of church friends. It was hard dealing with that situation, but we have not been back to church, and we just don't feel the need for it. And we're being spiritually fed. We're on Omega Kingdom with Russ and with you guys, but some of the extended advanced classes are just wonderful. And the opportunity, and that's what we like, is we like continuing fellowship, continuing to grow in our faith and our knowledge in the Word. So we just had this class that we just finished. It was outstanding, and we're looking forward to another one. So
Yeah, that was Jan Coverstone's class.
yeah.
I would like to add too that when we first got married, we were doing a ministry called Walk to Emmaus, which is also another small group ministry, just a wonderful ministry. And then that led into Charis, which is a prison ministry, but it's a small group ministry within the prisons.
Right.
And that was,
We've been doing prison ministry for
Yeah.
20 years, and also the Walk to
Right.
Emmaus and that Unidos in Cristo, or many different denomination versions of it.
of Walk to Emmaus.
Yeah.
And Charis. For myself, when I was younger, it was always choir and worship music. Spiritual music is just so important for my life. We both have sung in choirs, worship leading and choir. So that was a big part of mine too.
And these Christian festivals that go around the country, we're both big time old rockers. And so we love Christian rock music.
Yep.
And so I've served on a number of prayer teams at festivals, like and have been to probably 25 different Christian rock festivals around the country.
You've probably been to a Petra show or two, I imagine.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Love Petra.
Yeah.
I've been to a couple of those myself. So
Yeah.
there's a natural tie-in between the small group and Omega Kingdom and Ekklesia.
What Ekklesia brought to the table for me was a realization of what we're supposed to have, and the gifts, and that we're called to cast out demons. And why aren't we seeing more miracles in church, prophesying, and just all the gifts that we have? It wasn't about a presentation at a church. It wasn't about a building. It was really about us sharing our love, our knowledge, and our gifts, the ruling council. That blew me away. That was an understanding, the council. So for me, it was a natural, because accountability groups, I will say that I'm on probably as big of a spiritual growth journey right now in my life. I'm 67 years old. I've been very involved in church for 35 years. at every level a lot of time and a lot of stuff, teaching and all that. And I feel the power of the Spirit and the power of Ekklesia bringing it out. What I found, Tom, that's very interesting is that there was an initial response of, you're leaving the church and what's your problem? You know, and when people that know you and know our faith and they ask questions and they start hearing why, you know what? They listen.
Mm-hmm.
And they're interested in getting involved. We've got some couples that are going to be starting up in boot camp. They've made a commitment to go to boot camp, and you know, they just it's you know, because people are thirsty for what Ekklesia, what God wanted that fellowship and that growth and that ruling council to be. That's so I'm talking about people that are strong, that are pretty strong Christians too. They seem to almost be more responsive than maybe your newer Christian or somebody that is just, you know, searching. And so the idea of a church and, well, I'm just kind of doing my thing. Whereas people that understand what they do and don't get from a church, when you start talking about Ekklesia, they're pretty intrigued by it because they want more.
So how did you find out about Omega Kingdom Ministry?
It was Mark Taylor. My sister Sue and I are very close. She's a strong Christian, and we've done a lot of stuff together. And we started talking, and I was the one that looked up the Ekklesia and the boot camp and the classes. And I remember calling and we were laughing, going, "Now what are we getting ourselves into?" You know. And I said, well, you know what? Because I knew nothing about Ekklesia. I was totally ignorant. So, you know what? We went in faith. We said, this is going to be fun. Let's play it out and see what happens. And little did we know how life-changing it would be for us and put us on a new trajectory point with our relationship with the Lord. Right. So, but we didn't know that up front.
No. One other thing I really enjoyed about the boot camp and that study and learning about Ekklesia was the corporate structure of the church and why we, you know, I guess why worship at home instead of in a church. You go into the church and it is a corporate structure. Isn't it the Jethro structure? And both Ike and I worked in the corporate world and he worked for a state, and we could see how over the years you get a certain place in that pyramid in your job. And then looking at that with the church too, it's the same way in the church. You go into a big church and you got your one little place in there. And what's so beautiful about an Ekklesia or home congregation is everybody gets to participate. And if you really come one day and you're not wanting to participate, that'll be fine too. A day that you just want to be listening, you want to be listen only, well, that's fine. But at least it's not going to a big church where you go in and that's all you do is listen, which is a lot of the church. So
the 501c3 gig and that whole, people don't know that, if anyone is watching this and saying 501c3, check it out. You know, you just got to check it out because it really is a sham. I was shocked about King James and the Bible and how he, with the translators, and gave them, no, instead of Ekklesia, you're going to use the word church. And of course, who's the head of the church is the king, you know, rather than Jesus being the head of the church. That really hit me pretty hard.
I'm really glad to hear you guys encouraging other people to take boot camp training. What do you say to those folks? The reason I ask is I think we need to ask more of our folks to do that. And sometimes we see rises in registration. Sometimes we see falls in registration.
Sure.
And right now we're kind of at a lull, but Russ talks about when the mass exodus of the church system comes, and we haven't really seen the majority of that yet. For instance, if they start mandating vaccines,
right?
If pastors say you can't come to my church if you don't have take the vaccine, a lot of Christians are going to say, you know what, I'm going to do something else. And
Right,
then
right.
that and other things will cause the mass exodus. So what do we say, or what should we say, or what do you say to people to encourage them to take the training?
Well, I think first off, I would just say it equips you,
Mhm.
and so the reality of it is, I just backdoor it. What do you got to lose?
Mhm.
It's good. It's at your own time. It's not going to cost you anything. I think most of the time when I'm talking to people, they see that I'm on fire and that I believe it, and they'll check it out because of that. The 501c3, what Mark Taylor, they were the Great Awakening movies. And so how things have changed. Just think of where we were at a year ago and what we've
Mhm.
been through in a year with politically and what's going on. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, you want to talk about a battering ram. There's two areas that really bothers me a lot. And this is what I tell people. First of all, how many churches do a good job of really teaching about the Holy Spirit? How many churches do a good job of teaching about the kingdom? Thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then as far as spiritual warfare and how to deal with spiritual warfare and claiming the weapons, binding and loosing. And we are in a battle. That's our promise. And churches, there's a lot of impotent Christians out there that have been going to church their whole life and haven't been taught the core basics of how to live as a Christian in a secular world. And we are living in a very secular society. You know, yeah, we've got our churches, but how many people in churches are really living as Christians should be and have the knowledge? When you start talking about warfare and you start talking about the ruling council and why aren't we seeing miracles in churches? If you believe in that, if you believe, why aren't we?
And healings.
Why aren't we seeing healings? And why aren't we casting out demons? And why is that shunned in the church? The Great Awakening movies really shook us up about sex trafficking, human trafficking, pedophilia, Satanism, then getting into the 501c3 and getting into just a whole array of things, and then bringing that in to a ruling council and what we're called to do to be the body of Christ. It just all made total sense to me. And when I talk to people, that's what I do, is I talk about those things. And most of them, when they think about it, realize that it's true, and churches aren't doing that.
Also in boot camp, and I would tell people that you're going to get a very, very good biblical teaching on Ekklesia. It's based on Acts in the early church and how we should be biblically driven. And the two don't contrast each other. They fit together very well. The spiritual warfare and the awakening with the biblical teachings.
Biggest problem, Tom, that I find is that I when I'm talking about Ekklesia and small group and stuff like that, I am the black sheep and I am bold. So the problem I have is I need to keep politics out of it sometimes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times politics ends up taking away from that. You need to table it and stay on spiritual things.
We developed a code words for each other when it looks like our audience is getting overwhelmed, that we should kind of slow down, let them take it in a little bit.
What's the code word? What's
No, we
the
can't tell you.
Darn. Probably has something to do with hockey, I imagine. But
Hockey.
It isn't.
No.
that's a great segue. You mentioned politics, and there is a time and a place. So recently it became clear to many of us that it was time to go to Washington, D.C., and our president even put out a call.
Yeah.
He didn't call people to come down there and riot. He didn't call people to come down there and be violent. He called people to come down there and assemble peacefully. And of course, other things happened there that try to fly in the face of that, but it's yet another deep state scheme. But all that to ask you the question, what was it that made you drive all the way from Wisconsin to Washington, D.C.?
Holy Spirit just moved me and said, you're going. And I came up and announced to Barbie that I was going. I think it was standing in the gap. My brother was critically ill, and he and I were going to go together to stand in the gap, Promise Keepers, where we had 1 million men on the National Mall and claimed Washington, D.C. as holy ground. And my brother passed away about 2 weeks later, and I ended up having to be with him. And I mean, I was driving back and forth to Chicago to help him. And so I looked at this as I'm representing, I need to go and do this. God is calling me. It was a spiritual thing for me. And I knew that I just wanted to be there to pray for the country and to represent my area and my family. And I got to tell you, Tom, the number one reason was I wanted my grandchildren and my kids, if these things go south, if we lose our freedoms, God help us, pray that that doesn't happen. And if things go south, I wanted my kids to know. I did a video before I went to my kids and to the family, and Barbie and I did, and said, this is what we're doing for you.
Coming away from there, what can you encapsulate? What did you bring back with you? What was your kind of summary of the trip there?
I would say that we are not alone. We met a lot of great, wonderful, beautiful Christian patriots.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also say evil, evil, evil.
Yeah.
I just had an overwhelming presence, dark presence. I just felt the weight of that town that just made me want to puke.
But in that evil, we were standing with other
Absolutely.
Christian
Totally.
soldiers. Yeah, it was good.
But oppression and
It was miserable, and yet it was glorious at the same time.
Yes, I felt that very same thing, felt oppression the whole time as well. So how many miles did that end up being from where you live in Wisconsin to DC? I know you did it over a couple of days each way.
Yeah, it was about 2,600 miles.
That's a long way.
Yeah. We got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure we got back, because I had both of my sons here for meat processing. We all deer hunt together, and it was our weekend, and they were here all set up and ready to go. We just finished 4 days of meat processing.
Wow, I know where to, if I need to bug out, I know where to go then.
Yeah, that's right. It's all good.
Is there anything else that you both would like to say before we close our program?
Well, I would just like to say that, you know, it's Ekklesia and the boot camp and the online training that we've enlisted in has just all been more small group ministry that's blessed our marriage. And it's such a blessing for us to do these things together, and it could be done together. And that's,
I think Ekklesia,
yeah, it's a blessing.
I think Ekklesia falls in line with really what it's going to take to pull this country back together, taking it county by county. And it's the same way. It's not the mega churches, and if you're a mega, whatever, I'm rural. But the bottom line is, when you take a small group of people that are praying together and fellowshipping together, are growing together, and you duplicate that out, I think that's what Jesus wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what he meant by the church, the Ekklesia. I think it's real. And so I think it's a way for us to get the most out of walking our faith and living. For those that are hungry, that want to grow, there are so many opportunities that I would encourage you to don't take it like, well, I'm done with that now. This could be a great journey for you for years to come, and you will be blessed.
Amen. Well, Ike and Barb, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on the program and to speak and answer questions and to talk. And I look forward to putting this out there and letting people get to see it and respond to it as well. And thank you for
your
Yeah.
We
involvement.
appreciate an
Thank you for your
opportunity to
ministry.
share it. We're
Okay.
blessed. God
Yeah.
bless you.
Thanks
Thank
so much.
you.
Bye.
God bless.
Well, that just about wraps it up for this edition of Becoming Ekklesia. So until the next time, keep the faith, be who God created you to be, and walk in your kingdom authority. Becoming Ekklesia is a production of Omega Kingdom Ministry. For more information on Ekklesia, go to www.omegakingdomministry.org. Or to get equipped to start an Ekklesia of your own, visit www.homecongregations.org.